welcome. Thanks everybody for taking the time on the last morning of the conference. Thanks for getting up early and coming to this session. We're going to talk about OS updates with declarative updates and upgrades and kind of how we got here, how it works, and how to get the best results from that. So first we're going to go over a little bit of background on updates and the history of it. Because if you don't understand how we got here, you're not going to understand the best way to use declarative and why it is the way it is. Then we'll talk about the end user experience, what you can expect there, and the timelines of how you want to have those updates take place, and the release cadences for that. Then we're going to get into the where's the beef, the debugging. We're going to look at the logging behind how that functions on the back end. If you do have a problem or you just want to understand more how it works, where can you look for that, and what's the best way to pull that apart. Then we're going to talk about, very importantly, feedback to your MDM vendor and Apple. How can we improve the process as a community, and what information do you need to do that? And then we'll get into some Q&A time at the end. A bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded and the slides will be available on the conference site, and I will be doing a follow-up post on my blog with the slides there as well. If you can't find them there, that's macbuddy.info, and I'll have a link in the final version of the slides for all the things that are being referenced within the slides as well. About me real quick, my name is Bryce Carlson. If you haven't met me or we haven't talked before, I work in product at Adigy on the teams that build the MDM and declarative management stack. My extracurricular is Microsoft Conditional Access. Before that, I was at a school district, Appalachian School District, and University of Wisconsin Green Bay, where I was the Mac admin. Then I went to Jamf from there, and then Logic Monitor, and now Adigy since then. Fun fact about the middle picture there, that's Infinite Loop out in Cupertino. If you're ever out in the area, there's an Easter egg within Xcode. If you like going running, like I do in the morning, there's a city run that's mapped in the simulator there if you want to go and recreate it just outside Infinite Loop there. Highly recommend it. So, updates. Everybody's favorite topic. I'm sure we all feel like Charlie talking about Pepe Sylvia with updates because it's always changing, it's always different. You feel like some of it's a mirage. You don't necessarily know what's going on. Quick show of hands, just because I'm curious, and the first one's a joke, but who's ever done an OS update before? Okay, yeah. Who's done one with an MDM command? Okay, all right. Who's done one using the enforcement-specific declaration? Okay, good. If you don't know what that is, we're going to be getting into that. Who's used the new the revamped automatic actions in macOS 15 and iOS 18 and up for installs? Oh boy, okay, we need to change that. We'll be talking about that. And then a fun one, who's used a combo updater back in the good old days to update it? Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, speaking of, a long time ago in this galaxy, probably somewhere in this building, because the building was built in the mid-90s from what I saw on the website, there were different OS versions that were probably running in here. I got involved in Jaguar when my family got an iMac G4, and there were a couple different ways you could do the updates. You could do, through the system preferences where you go and do the update. You could do it using the software update command line, or you could use the aforementioned combo update packages. And what those would do would be if you want to jump from 10.4.3 or whatever shipped on your DVD that you popped into your super drive to install it, you could go to 10.4.11 as the final version using that combo updater, and it would do everything over the top of that. Panther was the first one that I actually updated. Famously, I wiped our family computer because I did an erase and install because I thought that sounded cool. And everything was gone, and people were mad. So, had to rebuild an iTunes library. I had to rip in all of my siblings' CDs over again. So, that was fun. But, you live and you learn. So then from that point, we go into Snow Leopard. That's kind of where I got into the management of everything first. And the thing to note there is that was the last version shipped on a disk. So there were two pressings of the DVDs for it. There was 10.6.0 and 10.6.3. And, you could do those and then run the combo. Lion is kind of the first time where this changes from way back in the Cheetah, Puma, Jaguar days. Lion is when you can The only way to get the update was from the App Store with the full installer. You could still use the system preference pane to update. There's still the combo updaters. There's still the software update binary. But in my mind, there's now kind of like a mega combo updater, which is with the releases on the App Store, you could get the full versions for each of them. And so you kind of have that other option to use the Start OS install binary within it and do the updates that way. Then the times are changing, to quote the Bob Dylan song that Steve Jobs always quoted. El Cap. 10.11 adds MDM updates using the Schedule OS update, Available OS update, and the OS update status commands that you can go and send a one-time event of like, go do this right now, and it will go do that right now if it can. You can still use the system preference pane or the App Store, because I know it moved around in there. You can still use the command line installer, and you can still use the combo update packages. But that MDM is kind of the first time that you were given a new, more modern way of doing that. Thing of note, that also covered iOS 9, iPad OS 9, which is the same thing at that point, and TV OS 12 and up, you could do that. We'll talk about this, but that's deprecated. And that kind of means that there's going to be new ways of doing updates. This is new with WWDC this year. The note in the public documentation is that it's deprecated. You should start using declarative in the future. So going back to the timeline then, we see that dotted line now in there. That's representing the MDM updates on that timeline. So we've got that. And then, we keep going along, we keep chugging along, and then we get to Catalina. And Catalina is kind of the last, bastion of those combo updaters, and that's kind of where it ends. There's no U-turn, no going back. That's the last one that you'll get a combo updater. But there's a good reason for that. So starting in Big Sur, macOS 11, the first to not be in the 10 dot series, those installers function differently. It will only install what it needs to update it. There's not a combo publicly available. I mean, there is a combo if you need to jump from like 11.0 up to a bigger version, 11.5 or whatever it may be. The only option to install from scratch would be using those .app installers using the Start OS install binary you'd get from the App Store installer. Kind of like that mega combo updater, I guess, to put it that way. But there's really no reason for those to exist, and frankly, the reasoning is probably to coincide with the fact that that's when we started seeing SSDs in every Mac. You don't want to have extra read-write cycles on the SSD. Why do more actions than you need to? Just do the update that you need. The other thing, too, that changed is that's when we started seeing the Silicon MacBooks and the Silicon Mac Mini there's a different way that needs to be updated. So I take a screen. I was trying to find a visual for it, and this post from the Mac sysadmin gets the point across of like, hey, I've been using the installer command for software update, and it doesn't work anymore. It's asking for a password. What the heck? I can't just do that quietly in a script in the background. And well, that's because, as we'll talk about, it needs that authenticated reboot to do that install. So macOS 11 Big Sur is the first version that, if you want to do that update or upgrade, it needs that local authentication from the volume owner. Or if you send an MDM command, it can send an authenticated reboot using the bootstrap token, like we'll see in an example, actually. So that's kind of where that starts. And that pink dotted line continues on then until we get to the more modern days of Sonoma. Sonoma is the next big shift. We now have the red dotted line there. That's when we add in the enforcement-specific declaration that I just talked about before. It's also when Apple added the 403 response within MDM and ADE enrollment, where you could say, I want this device to update before it ever enrolls. That way it's on the newest or latest version when it actually goes through and does the MDM enrollment. That's not a declaration. That's just was added in the enrollment process with Sonoma and up. Then with macOS 15 and iOS 18 and iPadOS 18, we got declarative, what do I got there? Pro plus Max trademark, because it's like another iteration on top of the enforcement specific, a different declaration, but giving you more granular control with a different declaration object. And what that's allowing us to do is say, I want to set a specific cadence of, I want, after 1 to 90 days, I want to go and do the update after that point in time. I want it to automatically go and take place. Really what this is doing is it's modernizing the config profile where you'd have the deferrals, where you could hide it and all that. This is just a declaration version of that with a few other controls that are added to it. But from Apple's What's New from WWDC 2025, page 15, if you're looking for it. Software update management using mobile device management commands restrictions on the aforementioned profile payload, and its queries is deprecated. Apple will remove it next year. Going forward, organizations can manage and enforce software updates using only declarative management. So that's kind of why I got the little question mark config there, because after that point, probably OS 27, that's going to be a little bit different. Now, there's more what we're going to talk about at the end of this of what the community can do around giving Apple the right feedback to make sure we're covering all those use cases while we're in this cycle going towards this deprecation, to make sure that OS 27, whatever that may be, supports and covers what we need for all those different update cases. What is it going to be called? I don't know. We got Tahoe now. If they were, maybe they're trying to butter up GM to get them to take CarPlay and put it back in their products. So maybe Yukon Denali, that keeps with the nature theme. Escalade has to do with climbing. It's a French derivative, but maybe we could go into a whole new extreme sports version with that. But anyway, so there's 3 types of managed updates. The MDM updates, the enforcement-specific declaration, and then the software update settings, global settings, automatic actions, and the declaration there. One thing of note, and this is why I talk about the community feedback we'll talk about at the end, that's for just the OS versions when you're using the MDM command or the enforcement-specific declaration. Yes, the global settings and automatic actions can do that, but there is no way within the enforcement-specific where you'd pick a specific point in time to do a Safari or Xprotect update. Those are still only done via MDM or the automatic actions if you have that configured. And if you're like me, a Safari boy, and you use Safari and you think Safari should be used in the enterprise, there might need to be some feedback to Apple around that, and I've already sent in, and we'll talk about at the end, about how you could manage the release cadences and points for that. So with that, what does the end user experience and the admin experience look like for each of these before we break down the logs of them? So MDM updates, which again, like I said, deprecated with macOS 27 and up probably, but there's things you can send. You're sending, default install later or install force restart for what do you want the device to do with it. The little looping video there, that's the countdown if you do a default. You get a 60-second countdown once it's completed and prepared and readied everything. You can pause it by clicking on the details or going into that specifically. But that's going to go ahead, restart the device, do the update. The install later had a prompting methodology where you could provide a numeric value of times they can defer it. Frankly, it never really worked. It got a lot better on 13 as it went on in 14, but then obviously there was enforcement specific. But the other one is install force restart. That's the one that I use when I'm sending one-off commands to devices, when I'm on the phone with somebody, helping them, a family member that has a device enrolled in my MDM. And I'll say, okay, you're going to see it go, it's going to reboot, and you're doing it at that point in time. Again, like we're going to talk about, that's kind of the only thing that MDM updates is the one-trick pony on right now within the managed updates is go do it right now and do this at this point. And that's maybe the use case we need to provide to Apple on some things around that with feedback. Enforcement specific. It varies from vendor to vendor. Some vendors have you pick a time. For NMPI reasons, I only have a screenshot here of Adigy, but I know within Jamf you pick a specific date time to go and do it. Each vendor does it differently, but basically you're saying, I'm sending a specific time that the device is going to go on its time, machine time, whatever time zone it's in, on that date and time, and what build version I'm going to do. You can also now pass a URL, so that will show up in system settings. You'll see it on the next slide. So if you want to give the user some context, if they're investigative enough to go into system settings, there could be a URL there to a KB article to help them understand what's going on with updates. We'll talk about how to set this up or what we've seen best results with in production towards the end here. So like I said, if you pop in there, that's what the URL shows up. While it's doing its downloading, you can see that in there, and also while it's prepared. When it's done and ready, it'll say, hey, it's going to go, at a certain point in time. Here you can see the one on the side is it's going to go in 2 months. So that's when it's set to go and install there. Once it reaches that enforcement time, in this scenario here, 11/17/24 at 2 p.m., the device is going to go and update at that, and then here's a different screenshot from a different device. If it pops up, you get the little notification on the iPad, hey, your device has been updated, when it goes through and does that on the back end. A little bit better version of what that looks like in macOS 15 with the URL there. You click on it, brings you to the stuff there. Now, the new global settings with the automatic actions, it's a little bit different. It doesn't give you a specific time. It just says, hey, we're going to do this tonight. When the device can do that. If you pop into the system settings, you'll see that the different things are grayed out because it's under that declarations management, and it has the release cadence and how long are you going to defer and are you going to download those things automatically. After the preparation is complete, so like on the screenshot there on the left-hand side, it's going to prompt them, and it's going to try and use on-device machine learning, and we're going to look at some examples of that in just a little bit, of determining when is it suitable to install that. So it's always going to try and do it overnight if the device meets the criteria, and we'll talk about what the criteria is. To authorize that update, it's going to try and use the saved state of their passcode or password from the last unlock of the device to perform that, but it may prompt the user if that doesn't work. You'll see an example of that as we go on here. Here's a little bit newer version because it's changed UI just a little bit, but in macOS 15, you're going to get that little elusive green check mark, the mythical, magical green check mark everybody's striving for, and also there'd be the button to say, I want to cancel that scheduled update. So if, for some reason though, like my production device here that I forcibly did not reboot, even though I do reboot religiously every day, I didn't for 2 weeks, and I didn't lock it because I work from home, I got the prompt saying, hey, we need your password to do this tonight because I don't have a way to do that. Now, it will try and use the bootstrap token from the MDM vendor. Seen some hit or miss with that. Even when the bootstrap exists, there's a number of feedbacks open with it, but something we'll talk about towards the end here. What does it look like when that goes through automatically? Here's a screenshot, and I'll expand it here on the next one, but of a VM I just left running overnight. If we look in the install history in the system report, we can see at 12/12/24 at 1:19 a.m., it went through and it updated. And as we'll talk about, we got a report back from the device. So within my MDM vendor, I can see, oh, it installed this update with the reason of notification. And it completed that install on the device then. Well, what does notification mean? Install reason notification? Well, what that means is I got this, and I didn't do anything other than just let it do its magic, and it was able to go through and do it. I'm going to put a key of what all the different reasons can be on screen in just a little bit, but basically it's saying, I got this, I didn't touch it, I let it go through, it just happened automatically. So what does that look like with the beta? You get that, boom, it goes through. This is actually this is the one that was running our booth video. I just let it go one night overnight. It updated to beta 3, and it installed at 1:07 a.m. And then if I see again from within the events within my MDM, that status channel is passing back. It installed with a notification. Oh yeah, I also put a video in here just so you can see what reactive UI looks like. If you click on the details there, it'll bring up system settings. For some reason, it needed to go and check again, but you can see that where my cursor is, I'm part of the beta program. I'm supposed to get that beta. It's going to automatically install that. I can see I've got the green check mark there. If I click on the information I to inspect, I can see I could cancel it if I want. Otherwise, it's just going to go through and do its thing tonight. And if I click on that link, it'll take you to Apple's KB. They do not have a details URL like they do with enforcement specific here, maybe a point of feedback. So it goes through and you get the notification. So timelines on that. That's great, but you actually kind of need to know what's going to take place more specifically. So MDM updates, you're sending the command is acknowledged, and that update's going to go and run, whether that be the default or the forced reboot. In the case of the install later, once they pick that time, it's going to go ahead and do that. The enforcement-specific declaration, you're going to again be sending that target local date time, the build version, the OS version, human readable, and then the details URL if you want to. That is optional. The settings declaration for the new stuff with automatic actions, in my opinion, there's two parts to it. It's all the same declaration. But the things not pertaining directly to the takeover of the install would be, you can say if I want standard users to be able to go ahead and do the updates themselves if they get a prompt. You can control how many notifications they get. It's kind of a weird option. You can either show them everything or only 1 hour before, but it exists if you want to control it and have them see less notifications. I would always err on the side of I'd like more, so users see it. The recommended cadence for iOS, because you can have a release cycle for that's a little bit different than Mac OS instead of just latest. You can control the RSR, the rapid security response updates, if the user can install them or can remove them. But most importantly, you're setting that timeline for the install. You're turning on the automatic actions to say, I want to download the update and I want to install the update or the security update automatically, and you're saying, I want to set that to always on. Then you have the deferral window of 1 to 90 days, where you're saying for 7 days, don't show the end user it, don't try and do it. After that 7 days, try and start doing that whenever you can. In most scenarios that we've seen in production, it will usually go the day after or the day after that deferral goes away if it meets all the criteria like we'll talk about. And then obviously you can also do the beta stuff, and we'll talk about that at the end here. But that's not the only thing. Network, that if it doesn't have network, it can't download it. If it doesn't have a state of charge, if it's a portable, that it needs to have to do the update, it's not going to do that. And if the end user is using the device or has applications open that don't allow for the device to have that save state and reboot, it'll stop that process. So for the state of charge, this is from one of the Apple documentation KB's link there. The state of charge, the bottom line is over 50%. For Intel Macs, it's 50% across the board really for the dot releases and the major releases. Silicon, if the end user initiates it, for the updates and upgrades, you can get down to a 20%, but really the bottom line is 50% there. iOS is a little bit better, iOS and iPadOS at 30%. But really, to prepare those updates, it's going to need to be plugged into power anyway for the automatic downloads. So really, if someone is in a one-to-one scenario and taking their laptop back and forth to work and it's getting plugged in, or they're working from home and it stays plugged in, it'll prepare it and it'll get ready to go and do that for the automatic actions. Enforcement-specific declaration, in this example, we're saying, okay, I want to install the update at a specific date and time 30 days out from now. The end user will get a notification that that's available. They could go and do it if they want. At that point, they will need to go and install that update though, download that update, because obviously they just got the declaration. And so it's not going to have prepared it, but if you don't touch it over the next, halving of that period, when you get to 14 days, it'll have prepared that. It'll say, hey, the update's available. Do you want to go ahead and do it now? Of course, the user's not going to click now, but they'll ignore it. It'll have that time, or will not have it. It'll cut that time down to the last 24 hours before it, and that's when the behavior changes. It'll break through do not disturb if they have it turned on to say like, hey, there's an update. Do you want to go do it now? I have it prepared and it's ready, and they can go kick it off. And then every hour, until they get to that last remaining hour, it's going to say, hey, I've got an update. Do you want to do it? And of course, the user's going to say no. And then when you get to the last hour, it's going to break it down by 60, 30, 10, and then the last 60 seconds. In my experience with the support tickets we get, the users don't see it till the 60 seconds remaining. But, the thing to keep in mind there is this is different than the automatic actions, and frankly why I think automatic actions is a better experience, despite the fact you lose some control, because when that 60 seconds is done, it goes. We've gotten support tickets where VP of sales or whoever is on a Zoom call, and it reboots. The funny thing is, I don't know if it's still this way, but early 14 days when we had pushed this to production, we were getting where people were on a Zoom call, it went for the update, the screen went black and it had the loading bar, but they were still on the Zoom call. So they could still talk, and then all of a sudden it just finally eventually cut it off and rebooted it. There are some things that will stop it, like if it can't force quit something that the OS is aware of, I don't know what it is. I've never been able to pin that down. But the other thing that can stop it would be, you'd say, okay, well, I pushed an enforcement specific for 30 days and it's been 45 days and a bunch of these devices aren't updated. Well, if it's never charged, which is a lot of people's devices if they are out and about, or if it has no free space, which is also a lot of people's devices, it's not going to be able to download and prepare that update. Or if they have a bunch of apps that are open and their dock is like 9 miles long, it might not be able to go and do that update when that enforcement specific comes through. We'll talk about some logging, how you can figure that out. Now, what happens if they miss that time frame? Let's say they were on vacation. They had a 1-week vacation. The enforcement was supposed to happen on the Wednesday they were gone. Well, they come back Monday morning. What's going to happen is it's going to go, hey, this is past due. I need to do this now. Is the update prepared? Yes. Okay, great. Give them that 60-minute warning that, of course, because they're going through their Outlook inbox or mailbox, they're going to miss. And then 60 minutes from now, it's going to go ahead and update and reboot the device. You could reboot the device at minute like 58 or 50, basically minute 58, and it would restart that counter again, but no one's going to notice that. If the MDM is fast enough, if your MDM does this where it'll rip it back off and then you could reapply a new one if you have a new configuration for those that were out there, you could do that. But it's going to be a matter of how quickly do you know if it actually enforced it and what version it's on in there. But the bottom line is pick times that the devices are on. We'll talk about that in a bit. So here's like a comparison. So like one of them is saying it's scheduled to go at this point in time, and then below that it's saying you're past due. I'm going to do this, and at this point it was past due, so it was going to be going and rebooting because I left that sitting there on my device and it was giving me that countdown already. Automatic actions is different and better in my opinion because it's not going to just give you that harsh countdown and go. The things that we've been seeing, because we have a fair number of customers that are using it at least on a subset of devices, and we are using it internally on all of our production devices. It's kind of fun. It actually learns, kind of creepy too, I guess. I use the automator action just because it's AI, but automator is better than AI. The update will sometimes say, hey, you need to free up storage space, or you need to close apps because at the end of your workday, I'm going to try and update this. So these screenshots are actually from one of our support engineers that works on this. Shout out, John. That he basically, we filled his disk up on purpose with blank files to see like, hey, okay, if it has no free space, what does it do? Well, it tells you, hey, you need to free up some space. Users will probably still not necessarily always see that, but it will give them that prompt as it continues to try and do that each day. And then at the same time, if applications don't have that save state where it can do the restore when you check that box and say, hey, come back after I did the reboot, if the applications don't support that, it'll notice that. Some of the older versions of Office, like the really old ones or things we were playing around with just some different third-party apps, can sometimes make it do that where it can't restore the state. So it'll ask you, hey, can you close those so I can do the update? And then eventually, you can see these screenshots are from 2 days. On that Thursday, the 22nd, it did go then when we closed all that and freed up the space. So, release cadences. When is that actually going to run? So, there's the general updates that we get, like 15.4, 15.4.1, and 15.5. Then there's also the beta program that you could do as part of the public. You get kind of the final versions, release candidates, etc. Then there's the developer and Appleseed program where you're getting the betas from all the way back at the beginning of that cycle. I'll talk about why it's highly important to be in that. So MDM updates. This is an example from with the MDM that I use. So we're saying basically install, and then the other option that we're giving is resend that command if the status is older than 4 hours. Basically saying, I sent it, you acknowledged it, but you didn't go yet, so send it again. And then that cron job is basically getting a listing of what days of the week can we go and do it. So we're saying 5:30 device time. Go ahead and generate that. Give it a 12-hour window, so by the time they come back to the workday, you can try that again. Bottom line is with MDM updates, If you're using them or have to use them or things like for Safari, granted there's not reboots there, give it as many opportunities as possible because the device may or may not do it when it gets that command, and if you miss that window and it doesn't acknowledge it later, it might not go. Enforcement specific, you're sending that value of that date and time. So the thing that we've seen best results with is a 1 to 2 week window where we're saying, okay, after 14 days, at end of the work day-ish for that device, towards the end of the week, go ahead and push that out. That way the device will update and not interrupt the end user's time at work. Because again, the best scenario for that is you don't want it to take off like a rocket the following morning and just start going and doing that update. Let's say even best case scenario, they get 2 hours because they miss that first window of it, and it counts, and then they have to reboot or something else installs. They're still going to get booted off there. With the settings declaration for automatic actions, it's different. Since that uses that on-device machine learning, you do have a lot less control, but again, in my opinion, a better experience. The best results we've seen for this is using a 1 to 2 week deferral window, depending on your taste for what OS you want to be on and how soon you want to be on it. Then set the automatic actions to always on versus just, you're allowed to turn those on as the end user. Just force it to on, have it do the download, and then after that first or second night of that deferral window, it'll go and do that update then. At the end of the session, towards the end of the session, I'll talk about some metrics from our production environment with all the devices there and what we've been seeing and how it relates to giving feedback to Apple around that. Now, before we do that, let's talk about maybe the single most important thing in helping shaping the future of OS updates, the Apple Seed program. If you're not in it, get in it. If you're an Apple School Manager, Business Manager, or Business Essentials, you're eligible to participate in any of the beta programs. But obviously, Apple Seed, if you opt into that within ABM or ASM, it's going to be hugely helpful. And you can do updates using the settings declaration like we'll talk about. What it boils down to, I used this last year in my logging one, but it feels like a Jerry Maguire thing of, help me, help you. Like, give them the information so that we can, steer this to a better experience for everybody. So, you also get access to excellent resources that have notably improved in detail and quality over the past few years. And when you're part of the program, I have to redact some of that there if you're not part of that. But there's release notes, but there's also configuration profiles for testing and documentation from Apple in there. The other huge advantage is being able to do those OS installs using the automatic actions for the beta versions. So starting with 2024 and up with those global updates settings, you can push that using your device management if it supports it. So let's take a look at what that process looks like on a few MDMs and where you can find information about enabling that once you're part of the program. If you're using Jamf Pro, HCS has an excellent, highly detailed, extremely long, with many screenshots, PDF. It's an extremely detailed process, very well written documentation. Again, the link will be in the slides there, but if you just Google HCS Apple Deploy Beta PDF, you'll find it. And it takes you through how to get the token and everything and what you need to do to put that into your declaration within Jamf Pro. If you're using Intune, it's supported there as well. Intune I have access to because we are a partner there, so I have some screenshots from that. But basically, you're going into your settings declaration in the profile picker, and you're just checking the box. And the team at Microsoft has done a wonderful job of getting it well laid out in the UI there so that it's a little bit easier with less steps from the HCS one. And you just go in there, check the box, put your token in, and then you can push to whatever those devices get that configuration, those updates. Since I have access to that, if you're in Adigy, if you got your token in your if you have your token in your policy and those devices are in the root of that policy, you're good to go. It'll auto-populate that in your advanced settings. Underneath that, you'll get your program enrollment. You can pick, I want to be in, the Tahoe beta or the Sonoma beta. You could also offer the program with any of these where the end user could pick, but then, if you say require, it'll do that with the automatic actions and automatically go like the examples we'll be seeing. Bottom line is whatever MDM vendor you use, it'll show up in your settings declaration. You will see if it's requiring the program, and then within your software update settings pane, You will see if you're part of that program, if you click on that, you'll see, hey, I'm in the program, I'm not even signed in with my Apple ID. That way you could push this to maybe a select group of 10 power users or people that test your software deployments within your organization. That's one of the things that I always did when I was the admin at the university. I had a group of kind of advanced team of professors that used different pieces of software like Finale or Creative Cloud or whatever that did some things that were outside of the norm. I had them on an advanced release cycle so that they got the beta of whatever, even minor release. We're not even talking like a jump from like 15 to 26 for Tahoe. If you're just doing the dot releases so that they're getting that a little bit ahead of time, you could do that by putting those in that policy then. So that way they'll go through, those automatic actions will be turned on, they'll be part of the program, and they'll get those then using the automatic actions, or they could pick to install them when they're ready. So with that, the important thing is if you see something, say something. Report it to your MDM vendor. Don't know, each one might be different, but support make a ticket. If you're in Intune, you make the ticket right there in the portal. But logs, and screenshots of, I did this through here using the beta version of the update, and it failed here, or I got this weird error. Reporting Apple-specific beta program issues. Appleseed is hugely helpful because it actually is more specialized and targeted to the type of feedback that we'd be getting from the enterprise. But the one thing I want to stress is submit the feedback first from the affected device as much as possible. I know it's not always possible because you're doing replication on another device and then you bring it back to your production one, but it's extremely important to file the feedback first from that first device or VM, wherever that may be, as much as possible. Just because of how it gets tagged on the Apple side, you just need to do that way. Subsequent ones, if you replicate or do something else after that and you bring it back to your production device with the full sysdiagnose archive like we'll talk about, great, that's fine. And you can provide that with clear steps, examples, and again, those logs. Just want to give a shout out to the teams at Apple. The new approach they've been taking with Appleseed over the last year and a half, 2 years has been hugely helpful. I know they've helped us implement a lot of the stuff with Appleseed and the tokens internally. And it's nice to see the challenges that we have as a community being taken on and getting some improvement there. There's a lot to do yet, but the progress is great. So with that, debugging it. You've installed the beta updates or you're installing a regular update. What does that look like? Well, we're going to take a look at 4 examples. We're going to look at a MDM upgrade, so going from one version to a major version, 13 to 14. Then we're going to look at a enforcement-specific declaration where it was blank and pending and we didn't know why that was. And then we're going to look at an enforcement-specific declaration where it does complete. And then we'll look at the end of a settings declaration automatic action where it completes after it failed on an overnight attempt. The tools we're going to use for this are the full sysdiagnose from the affected system, so the system_logs.log archive, and then within that sysdiagnose archive /logs in the install log. I did a session last year that is recorded in the videos out there about how to digest those using some more command line stuff if you want to do that. For this purpose, we're going to keep it pretty high level with just some filters and copying and pasting the things that are relevant that you should be looking for. The declaration status channel, which came as part of macOS 14, like I was talking about with that timeline and when those got introduced. My personal opinion, but also professional, this is the single most important part of declarative device management because it lets you know what's actually taking place without having to go and pull the full logs from the device. Now, obviously, if something goes wrong, you're going to go pull the full logs anyway so you can figure out what that is. But like here's an example of within Adigy or whatever MDM, I don't have access to others for where it would pass it through, but the status channel is there. If your vendor's not using it, please ask their vendor and let them know about it. But if you click on the OS modal for it, you'll see, okay, here's the status channel. I click on it, and here we can see for the example we'll be looking at for the iPhone 12 I was trying to update, that it failed because of error 20 for the key bag. We'll talk about what the key bag is in a minute. But basically it's saying, okay, I can't go into the update because it's not authenticated. And without the status channel, you wouldn't know that unless you go pull the logs from it. And that's why it's so powerful, because if you have a device that's not updating, you go click on it. If the status channel is passing the right information that's detailed enough for you to understand what it is, or you can look it up, you now know why it failed without having to go and pull full logs from the device, or you go pull them and then you can actually have a starting point to go and look for. So the MDM example, we're going to take a look at macOS 13.7.4 to 14.7.4. It's an MDM command that's sent as a one-off to the device. So I went into Go Live or the devices page. I sent a command to just that device to go ahead and update it. It's a virtual buddy VM on a wired network. So you get the prompt, hey, there's an update requested. It's going to go through and it's going to go and install it once it pulls that down. If I hop into console and I start filtering by the MDM client and install in that version, what that's going to give me is a bigger version of that, of saying, hey, here's the MDM client, the install action was default, what was the product key? Now again, this is the distinction between the declarations and the MDM updates. The MDM-based update, I'm just saying install action default, here's the version. It's not a future time, it's not a when you feel like it later, it is go do it right now and start doing that. So then we'll see the software update notification manager where it's going to say, okay, what's the status of that? Go ahead and start downloading it. I'm at 0%. It's picked the version and it's processing that request and it goes out to go and do that. We'll see a number of different things interspersed with it, but really what it boils down to is the software update notification manager, software update D, MDM client, and then following through and looking for that product key as it goes to do that. So we'll see that it's got that, software update daemon is off to the races, it's going to go and do that, and then MDM client very shortly thereafter is within the same second even is going to go, okay, I've acknowledged this command, I'm doing it. So your MDM knows, okay, I know it's at least started it. Then we'll see the MDM client say, okay, yep, we're doing the install for that product key. We'll wait a little bit of time, we'll get to 61% there, yep, it's still downloading, wait a little bit more time, still downloading, we're getting close to 100% here. That's then when the software update daemon will take over. It'll start preparing that update for install. Bottom line is, if you look for this one, you'll see here's the human readable name. There's a bunch of stuff that's in this. It's very long because it talks about all the different criteria of it. But if you look for a message that starts with that, you'll know when that point took over. Then if we hop over to the install log outside of the unified system logs, we'll see the OS installer setup daemon going. We'll see that it's pulling from the update brain, which is one of the processes that puts the manifest there about the update. And we'll see it pulling from the actual download location where that is. We'll see the version number basically get called off by that process saying, yep, we're going to go ahead and do that. And then this is where that reference I made earlier about that authenticated reboot comes in after macOS 11 and up, where basically the update helper is saying, okay, we're on full security mode on this silicon device in this scenario. We need to either prompt them or use the bootstrap token. In this case, we're going to use the bootstrap token because it's there. So the final options before we go for the reboot, we have that we got from the MDM within that command. It's required. We're going to go ahead and do that reboot now. So it can do that without prompting the end user. So this is the big difference between using the command line and the old packages versus having to use MDM for those silicon devices and up so it can do that authenticated reboot in the background then. Some more time takes place. It says that it's installed. We'll also see underneath it, I forgot to bold it, the install history plist gets touched, so we know that that update installed. Great. So the device is updated. At this point, actually, it would have been coming back up with the loading bar where it's finishing with that time estimator, and then the device is updated. So that's a working MDM command one. Where can it go wrong? Well, there's a few places it can go wrong. If it didn't download, that might be a place where it went wrong. So basically, if you're looking for where it broke, because commonly it was with the download when I've seen those, we see a lot less tickets with it now because a lot of people use the declaration. I would start with looking for the update notification manager in that status for the major or minor. It would switch that based off of which one that is for the update in place for a dot release or a full. Look for that and then kind of pull back the layers of the filtering and kind of follow it with networking is kind of really the only way to do it. There's nothing specifically to look for because there's so many things that can cause a failed download with it in my experience. I gotta wait for my build here. Okay, before we move on to declarative, I know I don't want to belabor it because status channels, like, it changed my life, literally. There's a couple things to think about with it. Here's two examples. One of them is the one I showed before, but the other one's actually an example from a customer environment. where they were doing a macOS 14.4.1 to 14.7 install, and it was failing, and it was kind of failing with an error saying, hey, try again. There was an issue with the update asset. So one of these, the one on the left, as you'll see in the example later, even though it doesn't say it here because the time that it was polled didn't have the piece of information you'll see later, that one's quite clear. That one is that the passcode wasn't present. It needed a passcode prompt. The one on the right, a little bit less so, but it's still good to know that it's failing OS side. Like, it got the declaration, everything took place, it tried to do that, but it couldn't get the asset. So there was something with the download that failed. You can go pull logs, and that's going to be a point where that's an excellent one to send to Apple with a feedback so that things can get improved in future versions. And it has. I've seen a lot less of 7703 with the please try again with some of the later versions of 15. Some of the data around this. So this is from our production environment data. 54%, this is from about a month ago because I pulled it back when I was making slides. 54% are on macOS 15, 23% are on macOS 14, and then 10% roughly is on 12, 16% is on 12 and 13 that are still using those MDM updates. The point that I want to break down here is macOS 14, if we call it stuck, and what I was doing here is I did a query of how many devices in production have something in the status channel relating to an error. And so macOS 14, 16% of the devices in production that were on 14 had something where they were stuck with the status channel. macOS 15, there's only 7%. So basically, of a proportionate number of it, because obviously there's more 15 devices, but it's a half as much of those are stuck with 15. And it's because some people are using those automatic actions that it will try more and more than just the declaration. Kind of once it gets stuck and it goes past due, if it's stuck and the device doesn't get rebooted and the assets don't get reloaded from the update brain or from Apple, it kind of stays stuck, is what we've seen a lot on a lot of the 14 devices. So good improvements, and also if you have the status channel, very helpful that that can be queried, so you can kind of get a better picture of where that's at. The most common errors that we're seeing in the status channel is these. The ones that are kind of actually helpful with that would be the prepare failed 7740, where okay, I failed to do something with that update when it's actually trying to unpack the download. Download failed 7700, also helpful because you know that it failed there. So they're helpful. They're not always the most detailed, but the ones that are really super helpful, we see it less so. This is probably less than 3%. I bolded kind of what's relevant there, but like this one, connect to power. Oh, okay, this device wasn't above the battery requirement. Makes sense. User interaction required because it needed, and this is a macOS one where it needed that password. So okay, yep, I need to go get that user interaction to be able to have that update. I'll do the authenticated reboot. The bottom one's in German because it will pass back whatever the OS message is, and so if the OS is in whatever language, but what that roughly translates to is volume requires additional storage of 15.3 gigabytes, meaning they had no free space because the download for the full installer was about that. But it's really helpful to have these pieces of information in the status channel. So again, if you know where it is in your vendor's MDM, or find out where it is, or ask them if there's a way to pull that through the API, because if you have a device that's stuck, super helpful to understand actually what's going on device side. So let's take a look at an example where you're thinking, it's pending, but there's nothing from the status channel really about why it's pending, what's going on there. So macOS 15.4 to 15.5, and I was doing a pending update for a future enforcement time. The status channel was reporting that there was something, but it wasn't telling me what it was actually doing. So this was a VirtualBuddy VM, again, on a wired network. Bottom is a screenshot there with an Adigy where I can click on the pending update. It will tell me the status I've prepared and pull through that install state of where it's at, but it was blank. Couldn't figure out why. So we hopped into the logs for it. We filtered by softwareupdate.install. This is honestly, you could be more granular, but this is how I start any investigation with the declarative updates, especially for enforcement specific. because this is going to give you basically a timeline using whatever the status channel would be reporting. And so you can just basically just down, just move your cursor or use the down arrow and go through each of them as you're going through. And you know, oh, okay, it's doing this, it's downloading. Oh, it stopped here. Let's rip that filter off and figure out what was going on at that point in time. In my opinion, this is a lot easier than trying to figure out within the MDM updates what each of the individual services were doing, because you're changing your filters back and forth. Start with this, find your timestamp, and then work backward from there. So, looking at that example when we filter by it, we see here install software or software update dot failure reason. So this is one of the components within that status channel report, and we see, oh, the failure reason is that the update request was denied by another process that's currently performing an operation. Please try again. And then we see the install reason equals blank. There is no install reason. So it's stuck because it can't actually start the install there. We do see the install dot state, or sorry, the dot install state that it's prepared. And we see that it's the version for 15.5. So we know it's downloaded it. We know it's tried to unpack it, but it can't go beyond that point. So why was that within my UI here for the device record? Well, we weren't showing it there because we weren't getting the full picture of information. We had a code change around that so it gets populated, but that's because that install reason was blank. If we didn't have a reason, we can't tell you what it's doing for pending. Oh, it's just a bigger version of that. So yeah, that's why that was doing that, but what else could you see there? So software update.install reason, if you're filtering by that, can have these possible outcomes. You could say it's system settings, meaning that the reason that they did it was they went in there themselves in the software update preference pane, boom, clicked it, update took place. Install tonight could mean that they were like, oh yeah, I'll do it tonight. They click the notification and say install tonight. It'll take place that night. Automatic update would be triggered by the automatic update if that took place. Notification, if it was triggered by the user notification, they interacted with it in some way, and they say, yeah, okay, I would dismiss, I saw it, I'll let that happen tonight. That's going to be by notification. In all the examples I was doing before, that's what was happening because I was going and dismissing that when I was creating the screenshots for this. Setup assistant would be like what I talked about around that. I don't see that one often, if ever. Command line would be if they triggered it by the binary. If they have access to the terminal and can do that, they could go and trigger it that way using the legacy way and inputting their password for it. MDM would be if it was triggered like the first version there, the first example we saw, you saw it triggered by the MDM command. And then finally, the one that you'll see the most is if you're using that, again, enforcement-specific declaration, the install reason is going to be declaration. So let's take a look at an example like that. So we're taking macOS 15.4 to 15.4.1, and it's past due because I sent it so that I could take screenshots when I was making my slides back in May. It's on a Silicon M1 Mac Pro. It was my live production Adigy environment device, and I can see that I've got it pending there. So again, if we hop into a console and look at my logs and look at install reason, we can see that initially, before I sent that past due, before it got the declaration, that I had no failure reason, I had no install reason, I had no install state, and I had no pending version. Well, then we saw the update subscriber DDM controller getting a scheduled declaration. And it gets that, and there's some messaging that comes down with it. But what it boils down to is the enforcement date that I set it of 5:30 or so, May 30th at midnight. And I want to do 15.4.1. I was already May 30th, which means it's past due, and I want to show notification. So the next thing that takes place then is if we go back to that update status, we'll see that there's no failure reason because it hasn't failed doing anything yet. The install reason is marked as declaration. The install pending, or the install state is none right now because it hasn't actually started doing the install. And the pending version is the 15.4.1 with the declaration that I have there. A note about the red text on the bottom. That's not supposed to be there. There is an inconsistency that has since been fixed in 15.5 and up. So if you have older devices and you're seeing a duplication of that time, you will notice that it might not be the right formatting because it's actually not nested within the pending version like it should be according to Apple's documentation. But again, that's since been fixed. But if you're doing some filtering somehow from the logging, you want to use it within that nested install state. Sometimes though on 15.4.0 and older, that would be blank and it would only be in that bottom one. So your mileage may vary. We had to do some logic on our end as well of trying to figure out if it's blank, look at the other one and figure that out. And sometimes there's a mismatch. But 15.5 and forward, that is fixed there. So after that takes place, then the update will start doing its downloading. And if we look, here's my screenshot of it that I took at 3:26 where it's downloading, and at 3:25 is when we see the status channel there. So it's taking place at that same time then. Wait a little bit of time after that. The install state will flip to prepared, and then it will flip to installing. And so then the device goes through, it does its thing, and then it's done. It didn't have a failure reason. It didn't have anything other than that installing state. It completed. It worked. There was nothing else to look at there, really. Okay, last example then. The settings declaration using the automatic actions, and we'll use an iOS example here. It is very, very similar on Mac OS. It's just that I wanted to work a different platform example in here because the automatic actions really are very, very similar. And the beautiful thing about the software update status and the status channel is it's very uniform across all the platforms because of how they've architected it. So we're going to take this and we're going to go to 18.6 beta 3. It's in the Appleseed for IT beta. I have set a 1-day deferral, and I've set the automatic actions to on an iPhone 12. This is actually one that I did because I realized I didn't have a non-Appleseed version of iOS for screenshots that I had to do. So I did this actually just the other day here at the hotel, and it did work on the hotel Wi-Fi. It did have to try multiple times to download it, but it got there. And so what happened is basically I got the prompt after it was prepared and downloaded, and I could go and do the install. And it just was going to prompt me for that, but I ignored it, and I was like, no, whatever, I'm going to put the device back to sleep and let it do its thing magically overnight. So the first thing we saw when it got that declaration is I want to do the Appleseed beta, and I don't have an install state yet because there's no version yet until it goes out and does its query of what versions are there. The device went out and said, oh, there's a version. It downloaded it, and it prepared it. So I have the version, 73B. That was beta 3 of that, so the one that we were seeing in the screenshot there. So I let the device sit, left it plugged into power in my hotel room, but it didn't update. Well, why that is, the first time I saw that was 7/16, so earlier in the week, at 11:45 in the morning, but I just had it plugged in while I was down at the booth over here. And so I just left it sitting there. It couldn't update, and then it tried again. The thing that you might notice between these two examples here, this is the first one, you'll see that it says passcode locked there of the key bag required. It's because I just left it locked and hadn't authenticated it since it rebooted on the iPhone using the PIN. For some reason, I don't know why, and I need to file a feedback, it flipped to not having that in there, but I know what the installation key bag required is, and I know that code 20 just means that I need to authenticate that. So you might see that sometimes with the status channel. That's a great point to send feedback in, where it has a reason, the reason is the same, and then it flips to a different status channel message. You might say, well, how many times did it say this? How often does it do it? A lot. It just kept saying, hey, I can't do it, and it just goes on and on, because I just left the device sitting there, because I was like, whatever, I'll pull it the night before the session and put the screenshots in there. And so it just kept prompting, and basically, what it boils down to, I think if I'm looking at the timestamps here, it's like about every 10 minutes-ish, and what it is the status channel reporting back to the MDM. It's not the MDM necessarily polling it. So that's neither here nor there. Eventually, I came back to the device yesterday morning, and I went to unlock the screen, and it said, hey, we were unable to, in that second screenshot there, we were unable to install beta 3. I go and unlock the device, it pops up and it says, hey, I got terms and conditions for you. So it's possible, I need to look more into it, that toggling was because maybe necessarily of the terms and conditions and the passcode it needed back and forth. But regardless, I put the passcode in, I hit agree, and as soon as I did that, it was off to the races verifying the update because it already had been set and I hit install now when I locked it, days prior. Eventually, it came back to that failure reason, unmet, not having that for the key bag, for the authentication. Then it said that the update was prepared, and then eventually the update finished, the install failure reason, the install reason, the pending install state, all cleared out. Then it came back, boom, device is updated. A couple minutes later, I got the thing on the pop-up on the home screen that it was on 18.6. For some reason, it dropped the beta 3. I don't know why it was in the other one. If I go into software update settings, it's up to date. There's nothing else for it to do. So, feedback around this. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I am. If you have feedback, send it in from the affected device. The other thing, though, is there are two types of feedback. There's an incorrect behavior or unexpected. Like, for example, what I saw with the feedback I just had on screen about the enforcement time being outside of the array that it's supposed to be in. There is also suggestions. So this is a call for help. I'm putting it out to the community of please put in feedbacks if you have examples or business use cases about how we can make OS updates more granular with the automatic actions. I think automatic actions is a great experience when it works. And it works quite often in a lot of the things that we've been seeing, specifically quite a bit more than specific enforcement, and especially the MDM updates. But it does have limitations. I was an admin once. I don't love the idea of not knowing when it's going to install. I would like to be able to pick that time, or maybe a window of time. So what are the end user stories that you have that maybe require a maintenance window, or what the ideal end user experience would be step by step? Please file those. Two that I've already filed that I think might get us to a point where the experience is better is some type of maintenance window. And the idea I put in the suggestion for this was, let's say you have that setting for 14 days. What if you had another option within that settings declaration of 30 days? So you say 14 days or 15 days if you cut it in half. Try and do it automatically. Then after that 15 days is up, step it up a notch. Prompt them more, like throughout the day, and give like a 1 hour prompt every hour, like, hey, there's an update, you need to do it. Still keep trying to do the automatic action, but that way you're having that more of an enforcement time, but softer, instead of trying to just do the update at the end of that time window like enforcement specific. So really you're combining the power of those two as one. You could push an enforcement-specific declaration over the top of that, but like I've showed and pointed out, the enforcement-specific is still very heavy-handed versus the automatic action taking place at night. So yes, you could do it combining the two, but it would be better if just the automatic action had that more graceful way of doing it at night, because that's a good user experience. The other thing, too, would be that software update failure reason, making it more verbose. Maybe we could add some filtering, or having it maybe pass multiple lines versus just the one line of the messaging there. So 2 points, something to think about. If you want to talk updates, feedbacks, improvements, please reach out. My Slack is Bryce.Carlson in Mac Admin Slack. My email for my corporate email is Bryce@Adigy.com. My Mac Admin Slack is my own thoughts, my personal account. Or you could just yell at me in about 25 seconds right now for question and answer. So thank you. Using the PBS thing, viewers like you, thank you for your time. That's the feedback link, and let's get into question time. I'm going to throw it. So here we go. Ooh, good one.
So, is this on?
Yep.
Yeah. So my question is around the scenario where you've got a enforcement that is stuck.
Yeah.
That is something we're fighting. Is there some way that you found to clear that?
Unstick it?
Unstick it.
Yeah. No, but yes. So I left this out of the presentation because I'm trying not to just shill for my day job. But From macOS 14.1 to 14.4, we had something called the MDM Watchdog that was publicly available in the community. And what that was doing was it was unloading the install service, the update brain service, the software update daemon, MDM client, and then some DNS helpers. But macOS 14.4 and up changed the ability to restart that service because it's protected. So we actually can't do that anymore. We were seeing 90% success rates a lot of times with the enforcement specific when we had Watchdog able to unload and reload those. However, to the point of feedback and why I'm singing that gospel is, I get it. Apple wasn't getting the data they needed to try and fix it, because if you're just restarting the service and never grabbing logs, you're never going to find out why it was broken. We since modified that tool to make it just grab logs when it sees that. But obviously, you need to know to go and grab it and pull that from there. There are things that we've done internally before we switched to the automatic actions, and I've done with actually some customers that are in the room and at the conference this week. I don't love it, but you can delete the software update plist and reboot the device, which kind of forces the service to kind of kick that. It's not great. I use it as a last resort just because I don't like having to destroy that data. But it does, I'd say it's like 60 to 70% success rate with that, but you need to do it manually on the device, and then you need to reboot the end user. One thing that a customer was doing was they were setting a 21-day uptime rule. So I know when I was at Jamf, there you can set it. There's ways to do it with in other MDMs where you would say, hey, go, if you see this when you do your recon or your inventory or audit, if you see more than that uptime, give them a prompt, have them reboot the device. I hate this, it's like the show IT Crowd, ironically not from the BBC, who has question time, but have you tried turning it off and on again? Is really the best scenario for that.
Okay.
I use Adigy as my MDM. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yep.
But the set deferrals for the updates,
Yep.
that is saying I don't want the update to be immediately visible, not giving the user the ability to put it off.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's also making it not do the automatic actions.
Gotcha. So with that, if you don't want it to defer, you just uncheck that, send the payload, you're good. You don't have to set 0 days.
I always set 1 day.
Okay.
Just because I think back to, granted this wasn't declarative, but the RSRs that broke WebKit, I always do 1 day.
Yeah, I have a user who will install them at 3 o'clock when they come out at 2.
Yeah.
So it's...
I always do the 1 day. You could send no value and just have auto actions and it will pull it. The
Okay.
thing is too though, it's also depending on when the device sees it from Apple's CDN, so
Gotcha.
it might be the next day anyway too. If
Okay,
it doesn't
and then
return.
to your feedback point, are you submitting the, hey, I don't like that you took that feature away from me, and hey, there's a problem in the same location, or are there 2 different places to submit that?
Same location within the feedback assistant, but you'd send them as 2 separate feedbacks. When it comes to stuff like the not having the one-off for MDM updates versus declarative, I provide a suggestion with a full thing of like, I gave the example of like, I do my updates for my parents' MacBook Pros that are enrolled in Adigy that I manage because they don't do updates. And I'll call them and be like, hey, turn it on, okay, great, force reboot. You can't do that. Or if you're a help desk or someone calling in and be like, oh, we need to get it on this to install this one-off third party. Yeah, you could send a declaration, it'd be past due then, or you have them hop into system settings. It's just a lot easier when you send the one-off there. But yeah, suggestion, Apple feedback to the Apple Seed program.
Great, thank you.
Oh man, we haven't hit anything yet.
Do any of the download actions help with this workflow instead of just forcing, the time and the date, but pre-staging downloads?
So you're saying like combining enforcement specific and the auto action downloads?
Yes.
Yes, you could set auto action downloads and not the installs because those are separate keys. Yes, I have seen that. It does help because let's say you do an enforcement specific and you set it to like 90 days. Let's say you're one of those people, you don't want it, you're gonna not do it, but also somehow let it be visible. It would give it more chances to download it versus that having time where it might not try as many times. Plus, it will also try in PowerNap, where enforcement specific has been kind of weird about PowerNap. So yeah, it doesn't hurt to combine those, but at the same time, just use the automatic install at night too. No other questions? All right. Thanks, everybody.